So you took your first step into turn 1 Coil. Your whole group decided to stand on the shiny platform, and all of a sudden an army of slime spawn, and Caduceus ends up devouring them and heals right back up. Just an example of one of the bad scenarios for the first fight in Coil. If it's the first time you're in Coil and you're inexperienced or under-geared, the fight can be quite unforgiving, so let me try and break this down so that you can move on and start collecting that Paladin gear. For starters, let's break down the main mechanic to this fight in Phase 1 and 2. Our scaly friend here gains an attack buff every 45 seconds that stacks up to the point where eventually you won't be able to survive his attacks. But don't worry, this can be removed by feeding him dark matter slimes. Which brings us to bask in the glory of my amazing Photoshop skills to show you how the slime mechanic works. The entire arena is split into hexagon platforms, as shown in the main picture. The shield emblem is where the main tank is going to stand and get smacked around. During the fight, the platforms are going to light up, indicating that if you stand on the glowing platform, a slime can spawn after they turn off for every person that stands on said platform. So if 2 people are standing, you get 2 slimes, which can be avoided by stepping onto a non-lit platform indicated by the gray hexagon. Lucky for us, the glowing platforms have 4 patterns, as you can see from the diagram. Each one represents a pattern that the platforms can light up. The blue hexagons represent where the platforms are going to light up. Everyone must avoid standing on the glowing platforms. As the main tank, you can sidestep to the left platform if yours lights up. The trick to this is to have a designated person spawn a single slime. You can either use a ranged DPS like a bard, or like we do, we use our off tank to force spawn a single slime and drag it to the boss. While the off tank is dragging the slime, a ranged DPS needs to bring the slime's health as low as possible without killing it. Once low, the off tank brings it into the boss, where he devours the slimes, healing the boss for a percentage depending on the slime's health. The lower its health, the less the boss heals. The benefit of healing the boss is that it takes a stack off the actual attack buff that he's been gaining every 45 seconds. If DPS is doing his job, you should only have to feed him once or twice, till he reaches around 70% where Phase 2 begins. Caduceus has 2 main attacks. Hood Swing, which is a conal hard-hitting attack that as the boss gains attack buff stacks, it can hit like a truck and eventually one-shot the tank. Note that there is no red indication of a conal attack, so if you're not a tank, avoid being in front of him. His second attack is Whip Back, which is an attack that hits from behind and is triggered by someone standing behind the boss. This is the reason melee DPS try to damage him from the sides. Now this mechanic can benefit you because during the Whip Back, the boss can't melee or use his Hood Swing mechanic, giving the healers and the tank a breather. The longer the fight takes, the more beneficial it is to trigger. You can have a dedicated damage dealer, preferably a melee, to trigger the Whip Back, which you can see on this side clip. We have our Dragoon Zonza trying to trigger the whip at times. Now comes the curveball to this fight. After 70%, your goal is to try and get into Phase 2 with as few stacks of the attack buff as possible. 0 to 1 is what we aim for. It should probably take you 1 or 2 slime spawns to get him to this point. Once he hits 70%, Caduceus is going to split into 2 while splitting his health pool. The off tank grabs one ad and tanks him where he stands, while the main tank drags the other one north while avoiding your group. Tank him where the diagram shows with the second tank emblem up north. Both boss ads have to die around the same time and avoid getting them close to each other due to him joining back together and causing him to enrage and start stacking his damage buff real fast, eventually killing your tanks. We use a DPS split method to burn both the ads down at the same time. You can also burn one boss down really low and then have all the DPS swap to the second one to kill it. And if the first ad is not dead, they can swap back to it. Your healers should split and focus on his or her tank. Hood Swing is going to start hitting harder and harder as the bosses gain their damage stacks. I tried to save my tank cooldowns to around 4 or 5 stacks, but that can vary on your gear or choice. Your DPS should be trying to trigger the whip backs as they DPS their ad. This can save the tank's life if done right. We avoid spawning and feeding any more slimes, but if you need to, you can feed the boss's slimes to lower the damage. If you need to do this, assign a damage dealer per boss to spawn a slime and have him or her bring its health down and feed it to the boss. The DPS should not worry about its aggro, it locks onto whoever spawns it. If done right, both bosses should die around the same time or a few seconds apart. If damage is high, you can use a tank limit break, or if DPS is having some issues, make the choice and use it on one of the adds. With good healing and damage, eventually both bosses should be dead, and you get to collect their sweet loot and move on to turn 2. I hope the guide helps you get started down your path into Coil. Let me know if you like the guide and if you would like to see any other fights. If not, as always, feel free to troll away. Till next time, may the loot gods bless your dice rolls.